They called her a gold digger. They said she crossed an ocean for land, for cattle, for a soft bed and a warm house. They never bothered to learn her name. In Willow Creek, a woman like her did not need a story. She only needed a reason. Her name was Lin Zhao. She arrived with one trunk, one jade ring wrapped in cloth, and a marriage agreement written in a language this town refused to read. Her husband was named Thomas Hale, a rancher whose land touched the river bend. Good land. The kind of land men killed for without ever raising a gun. People smiled at Lin when she walked through town. Slow smiles. Lin did want something, but not what they imagined. Thomas hadn't promised her love. He had promised safety. In her old home, she had learned that love was fragile, but paper lasted longer than blood. She had seen families erased by ink, names crossed out, homes reassigned, lives folded into files and never opened again. So when Thomas said the West was simple, land cattle work, Lin smiled and listened, because she already recognized the pattern. The West did not kill you with bullets first. It killed you with documents. The first warning arrived on a Tuesday. The sheriff rode up alone, hat tipped low, horse calm. He handed Thomas a folded document and did not look at Lin once. Routine review. Water rights adjustment. Nothing serious. Thomas read the paper once, then again. Lin watched his hands. She saw the tremor before he did. He said the river bend might not be theirs anymore, that his father may have filed the deed incorrectly years ago. Lin reached for the paper. The words were familiar, even in English. Vague boundaries, unclear language, room for interpretation, room for theft. She asked one question. Who gains if we lose this land? Thomas hesitated, then spoke a name like it might hear him. Sheriff Hollis. Lin felt the air in the room tighten. She had heard the name in town, spoken softly, like it carried weight. That night she walked the property alone. She counted steps, watched the river, curve like a blade, noticed new markers where none had been before. Someone had moved the boundary, not with force, with paper. At dawn, men arrived, surveyors, deputies. They spoke over her, around her, as if she were furniture. One laughed and said, "Easy money. Foreign girl will not fight this." Lin smiled. She had crossed an ocean to survive. This land would not scare her. Inside the house, Thomas paced. They say if we do not sign, they will take it anyway. Lin laid the document flat on the table, smoothed the creases. Who wrote this? Thomas named a lawyer from the city. Lin nodded slowly. Then, we do not fight the sheriff. Thomas looked at her confused. Then who? Lin lifted her eyes. We fight the paper. Thomas did not understand yet, but he trusted her. Outside, the river kept moving, unbothered, unaware, and Lin Zhao understood something. Willow Creek did not. The West was not wild because of guns. It was wild because the wrong signature could end you. And somewhere in town, Sheriff Hollis sat comfortably, confident, believing the foreign bride would fold. He did not know yet. She had already begun to read him, and she never lost a war she understood. The document stayed on the table all day, like a quiet threat. Thomas tried to work, tried to focus on the ranch, but his eyes kept returning to that folded paper. Lin watched him. She did not rush. Fear made people careless. That evening, she unfolded the document again, slowly, patiently. She traced the lines with her finger, not reading like a rancher, reading like someone raised to survive systems. The language was careful, too careful. It never said the land was not theirs. It said the land required clarification. Clarification always favored the man holding the stamp. Lin asked Thomas to tell her everything. About his father, about the original purchase, about every visit the sheriff had made in the past. Thomas spoke in pieces, about friendly inspections, about favors exchanged, about papers signed without worry. Lin listened. She heard the same story she had heard before. Different country, different men, same ending. Power never took. It convinced you to give. That night, Lin did not sleep. She wrote notes, copied phrases, rewrote the deed by memory. At dawn, she rode into town alone. She dressed simply, muted colors, head lowered. She became what they expected to see. At the bank, she asked small questions, questions that sounded ignorant. At the courthouse, she waited, listened, watched who signed what, and how quickly. At the saloon, she drank water. Men talked when they believed a woman did not understand. They spoke of Hollis, of how the land by the river would soon belong to him, of how easy it was to scare foreigners. Lin smiled into her glass. She learned the habits. Which clerk drank too much? Which lawyer rushed his signatures? Which documents were copied instead of original? She learned Hollis always signed twice. Once clearly, once careless. A habit. Back home, Thomas worried. They say we have 1 week. Lin nodded. That is enough. She laid out the plan, not with anger, not with hope, with certainty. We do not confront Hollis. We invite him. Thomas did not like it, but he trusted her. When the sheriff arrived again, hat clean, boots polished, Lin poured him tea. He smiled politely. Confident, she asked questions, soft ones. She asked about his work, about the burden of responsibility. She asked to see the original deed. The room paused, only for a breath. But Lin saw it. Hollis hesitated, then laughed. Said of course. He brought it out. Lin compared it silently. Measured dates, boundaries. Something was wrong. Not loud wrong, careless wrong. A correction had been made, and the correction bore Hollis's stamp. Lin said nothing. She let him talk, explain, justify. She let him sign again. When he pressed the stamp down, she watched his hand. It shook. Hollis did not notice, but Lin did. The trap was not sprung yet. It did not need to be, because paper remembered. That night smoke rose from the barn. Fire ate wood. Fast. They said it was an accident. Thomas wanted to flee. Lin stood still. Because now the game had changed. The West had shown its teeth. And she was ready. She gathered copies, not for the town, not for the sheriff, for the city, for men who did not care about stories, only stamps, dates, signatures. She sent the papers away and waited. Because when power feels safe, it always makes a mistake. Somewhere in town, Hollis slept well, believing the foreign bride was afraid, believing the land was already his. He did not hear the river that night, but Lin did, and she knew. It was only a matter of time. The town began to change its tone. Not openly. Not yet. Smiles shortened. Conversation stopped when Lin entered a room. At the market, prices rose for her. At the bank, her name was suddenly missing from records. Small things. Careful things. Punishment. Without fingerprints. Thomas felt it first. Men who used to greet him turned away. Supplies arrived late. Work offers disappeared. "They want us gone," he said quietly. Lin nodded. "That is the point." Pressure was cheaper than violence. At night Thomas asked questions. What if they take everything? What if they come for us? Lin answered slowly. "Then we make sure they cannot." She had lived through worse. In her village the men who spoke truth vanished first. The ones who stayed quiet lost slowly. So she did not stay quiet, but she did not shout either. She waited. The investigator arrived 3 days later. Not announced. Not welcomed. A man from the city. Clean boots. Clean hands. He didn't speak to Hollis first. He spoke to records. He asked for copies, originals, stamps. Hollis laughed when he heard, "Routine?" he said. Nothing unusual, but his laugh sounded thin. Lin watched from a distance. She did not approach, because prey that steps forward too soon gets blamed. The next day, a man who had helped Lin disappeared. A clerk, young, nervous. They said he went west. Lin knew better. Thomas was shaken. "They killed him for us." Lin closed her eyes. "Not for us. For paper." That night they found the clerk by the river. No marks, no struggle, just water and silence. The town called it an accident. Lin did not cry. She had learned long ago that grief could wait. Justice could not. Hollis came that evening. No hat, no smile. He stood in the doorway and did not sit. "You're causing trouble," he said. Lin met his eyes. "You caused it." Hollis stepped closer. "You think papers protect you?" Lin answered calmly. "They remember longer than men." Hollis smiled, but his hand rested near his belt. "You should learn your place." Lin stepped forward. "I know exactly where I stand." That night, someone fired shots near the house. Not to hit, to warn. Thomas wanted to leave before dawn. Lin refused. Because leaving meant surrender. And surrender taught men like Hollis nothing. The investigator returned the next morning with questions, with concern, with copies that did not match originals. Hollis's stamp appeared where it should not. Dates overlapped, signatures differed. The investigator's face changed. Hollis noticed. He laughed again. But this time no one laughed with him. The gallows were built that afternoon, officially, for cattle thieves. But everyone knew it was a message. Thomas stared at it from the ridge. "They will hang me." Lin touched his arm. Not yet. She had one move left, and it would cost her. She went to the church. She knelt beside women who despised her. She spoke softly about land, about homes, about men who never came back. She did not accuse. She let them remember. Memory was dangerous. By evening, the town was divided. Not enough to fight, enough to hesitate. Hollis felt it. That night he sent for Thomas, not Lin. A mistake. Thomas went alone. Lin watched him ride away, and for the first time her hands shook, because paper could protect land, but it couldn't stop a bullet. The trap was nearly closed, and someone would be crushed inside it. She only hoped it wouldn't be the wrong man. Thomas returned near midnight. He did not knock. He pushed the door open like a man running out of time. His face was pale, his voice low. "He knows." Lin stood up slowly. "Tell me." Thomas swallowed. "Hollis offered me a deal. Sign away the river bend. Leave town, and he will let us live." Lin stared at him. Thomas continued. "He said if I refuse, he will call me a thief, a fraud. He will say I married you to hide money. He will say you're the scheme, the foreign scam. Lin felt the room tighten. So I told him no, Thomas said, and he smiled, like I had said exactly what he wanted. Lin asked softly, "What did he do?" Thomas looked down. He said, "My father signed a second deed years ago, a deed I never knew existed, a deed that gives him rights to the Bend. He said, the paper is real. He said, the stamp is real." Lin walked to the table. She took a breath. Then we forced the paper into daylight. The next morning, the investigator arrived with 2 deputies from the county, not Hollis's men, men who did not owe him favors. They carried folders, sealed notices, official questions. Hollis met them outside the courthouse. He smiled again, too wide, too early. He offered coffee, offered jokes, offered comfort. The investigator did not sit. He asked for originals, for logs, for the book of stamps. Hollis laughed. "Routine," he said. The investigator opened a folder. Forgery indicators, stamp irregularities, signature mismatch, unauthorized corrections. Hollis's smile twitched. Lin watched from across the street. Hidden under her coat were copies. She had sent them away. She had kept proof because she trusted paper more than people. The investigator turned a page. He spoke Hollis's name slowly, like the name itself was evidence. Hollis stepped closer. "You accusing me?" The investigator did not move. "I am asking you to explain." The town gathered. People loved a spectacle, even when it hurt them. Lin heard whispers around her. "Foreign girl caused this. Rancher brought trouble. Sheriff keeps us safe." Then a woman's voice rose. "My husband disappeared last spring, and the sheriff told me to stop asking." Another voice. "My brother lost his land after a fire, and the deed changed overnight." The street quieted. Hollis's eyes went hard. He did not shout. He looked at Lin, and Lin understood. He knew she was the blade. That afternoon, smoke rose again. Not from Lin's barn this time. From the courthouse records room. Flames ate shelves, ate history, ate proof. Men ran with buckets. Women screamed. Hollis stood in the street, watching, face blank. Lin watched him too. He did not look surprised, because fire was his favorite eraser. The investigator confronted him in the smoke. Hollis shrugged. "Old building," he said. "Dry wood. Accidents happen." The investigator's jaw tightened. Then he held up something salvaged, a stamp book, charred, but readable. Hollis froze for half a breath. That half breath was enough. County deputies moved, hands on Hollis, turning him. Hollis reached for his gun and stopped, because a gun cannot shoot a warrant. The town erupted. Some cheered, some cursed, some looked lost. Hollis's voice rose. "This is my town." A deputy struck him hard. Hollis fell to his knees, cigar crushed in dirt, hat knocked away. Lin's heart did not soften, not after the clerk in the river, not after the barn fires, not after the threats. Thomas stepped beside her. "We won," he whispered. Lin stared at Hollis. "Not yet," she said, because justice was never clean. That night a wagon rolled out of town quietly. No lanterns, no conversation. Inside the wagon was a witness, a man who had agreed to testify. By morning, the wagon was found near the bend, the horse still tied, the seat empty, tracks in the dirt, dragged toward the water. Thomas shook. Lin closed her eyes. The West takes payment, always. She had opened the door to law, and law had answered. But violence had its own language. Lin returned home, sat at the table, unwrapped her jade ring. Her hands finally trembled, not from fear, from rage held too long. Outside, the river moved on, and somewhere beyond the ridge, someone who served Hollis still breathed. Someone who believed Lin had gone too far. Someone who believed paper could be burned. And Lin knew. The last page of this story would not be written in ink. It would be written in blood. The papers arrived 3 weeks later, sealed, stamped, final. The river bend was theirs. Silver Creek Ranch restored. The county sent men to mark the boundary again. New posts, deep in the ground. No one laughed this time. Willow Creek moved carefully around Lin. Smiles returned, but they stayed shallow. People nodded, did not linger. They had learned something, not trust, but caution. Thomas worked harder than ever, not to prove himself, but to keep the land alive. He rose before dawn, came home after dark. Lin watched him quietly. They did not celebrate, because someone had paid. The clerk by the river, the witness in the wagon, names never spoken. One evening, Lin walked to the bend alone. The water moved slow there, deceptively calm. She knelt and placed the jade ring on a flat stone, not as an offering, as a marker, a reminder of what it cost to win. She did not cry. Tears were for those who believed victory was clean. That night, Thomas asked the question he had avoided. Was it worth it? Lin did not answer right away. She looked at the land, at the river, at the house still standing. Then she spoke. If we had lost, they would have taken everything and learned nothing. Thomas nodded slowly. The town learned too. Not justice, not mercy, limits. Sheriff Hollis was moved, not hanged, not buried, transferred, protected, forgotten. That was the West. It punished loudly and spared quietly. A month later, a man rode past the ranch at dusk. He did not stop. He wore no badge, no uniform, but Lin felt him watching. That night, Thomas found a mark carved into the fence post, a small symbol, a line through a circle. Lin recognized it, a sign used by men who erased others, paper killers. She burned the fence post before dawn, because some warnings were not meant to last. In Willow Creek, stories changed. They no longer called her a gold digger. They called her dangerous. She accepted that. Danger meant they were paying attention. One morning, she packed the trunk again, not to leave, to prepare. Inside, she placed copies, receipts, stamps, proof. She had learned the West, not its legends, its mechanics. It was not won by shouting or shooting first. It was won by waiting, by watching, by knowing when to move. Thomas kissed her hand before riding out. No words. They did not need them any more. As he disappeared into the dust, Lin stood alone at the porch. The land stretched quiet and wide. She understood something then. The West did not break her. It sharpened her. And somewhere beyond Willow Creek, men would hear about a foreign bride who did not fold, who did not run, who learned the rules and survived. She stepped inside, closed the door. On the table lay the jade ring, not worn, waiting, because some stories never end. They only move to the next valley. Go. End.